What is going on, everyone? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics, and we just finished the first half of 2024. And so the general tradition that I have been doing for the last couple of years now is to go over my top 10 losses. So if you don't know, I buy and sell comics. So I go over my top 10 losses from that period, that last 6 months, over $5,100 in losses in this one. So some big books. And I think these are always important because I feel like you learn a lot more from your losses than your wins. Let's check these out. All right, so before we get started, please remember to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button if you'd like to see more content like this. So, like I said in the intro, if you're not aware, I buy and sell comics, and there are always going to be losses that you take. And so what I like to do is every 6 months, I like to go back and look at what those 10 biggest losses. Actually, I look at all the losses that I took, but in this video, we talk about the 10 biggest losses and see if there's anything we can learn about that. And people just always seem to enjoy watching the books that I take losses on. I don't know why, but it seems like that's something that people enjoy. But I think that these are important for a few reasons. I've talked about this in the other videos as well. It shows that not every sale is going to be a win. I think that's just something you have to accept. I think some people have a very hard time, including myself, taking a loss. You don't want to take that loss. And so you end up, whether you've got the book price like right at the edge of the last sale or whatever, and if it just keeps ticking down, especially like what we've seen for the last couple of years, where we had those huge spikes in prices, and then you have books just like gradually trending down. And if you keep trying to grab that top sale, that most recent sale, if you miss it, it goes down more, and now you sell it for even less later. And so things like that, you just got to realize not every sale is going to be a win. Comics don't always go up. I mean, there are definitely books that are still going up right now, but there are plenty of books that have been going down since that comic boom. And you can also learn which books are those risky books. There are definitely trends that you can pull out from these sales where it can help you with what you're purchasing if your goal is resale, if you're trying to buy and sell comics. Now, if you're just planning on holding for 20, 30, 40 years, whatever, maybe this doesn't matter. But if you are trying to do some resale with these books, or if you have any type of short-term plan with them, this is the type of information that can be very useful. So with each of these books, I'm going to talk about what the book was, what I sold it for, my percentage loss and my dollar loss, and what might have caused that. Now, before we get into these specific books, just a little bit of information about these. So in this first half, I had 206 separate sales. 31 of those sales were losses. So that means 85% of those sales are profitable. And in reality, that's not too bad. I mean, if you look at what's occurred, especially over the last couple of years with lots of books trending down, having 85% of my sales being profitable, I mean, I'll take that. Now, these losses range from around $10 to $1,000 when you're talking about those 31. When we're talking about the top 10, the lower end is it's definitely higher than that. And the other thing I noticed was that this percentage was almost the same as my first half of 2023. First half of 2023, 87% of my sales were profitable, and this half, 85%. So about the same. Now, my total losses for these 31 books was about $6,900. My losses from those 10 books, the top 10, were $5,100. The one thing I just want to point out is that, yes, this is a profitable business for me. Just for comparison, the top 10 most profitable sales that I had, and I'm not going to make a separate video about that. I've had people ask that before. I'm not going to make a separate video about the top 10 profitable sales, but my top 10 most profitable sales were just under $32,000 in profit. So that's the type of thing that you got to look at. It's like, yeah, you can take losses, but your goal is that you have more profitable sales than not. So my top 10 most profitable sales ended up canceling out all of my losses, and then I still had a profit of about 25 grand. So just something to consider there is that, yes, it is a profitable business for me. I'm not trying to make this as like, a feel bad for me video or anything like that. But I think that the losses are important to talk about. That's really where you can, can learn the most, because a lot of times a profitable sale or a big win on a book is just luck. You happen to be there at the right time. You got a book for a great price, and then you're able to sell it for a profit. I mean, not a lot you can really learn for that other than look everywhere all the time to try to find good deals. But the losses, I feel like there's a lot more to learn from those. So let's start getting into these losses. I'm going to start with an honorable mention, just because I don't know, with all the 9/8 talk and everything like that, I thought that this one would be interesting, because I think this is the only, I had two 9/8s that were in my loss list, but this was number 11. So it was the closest to that top 10. And this was, and I'll share my screen here. This was Star Wars number 61. This book right here. And so I picked up this book in 2021, May of 2021, peak comic boom. I paid $318 for it at that point. But like at the time, Star Wars number 61, like just a Star Wars book, a 9/8 didn't seem like a bad pickup. And let's look at some of the pricing for that book. So we'll jump over to GPA. You can see 2019, 1,136, 2020, 1,031. Then it actually started dropping during the comic boom, 465, 618 is the peaks, then 266, 202, a low of 87. And so this is a book that definitely probably seemed rare in grade or something at some point. Maybe that's why it went for so much. I don't know for sure. But then, lots of people get it graded, and then you start to have a lot more volume of that book out there, and then they're not worth as much. But yeah, that one I bought for 318, sold for 150, and took a loss of $191 or 58%. So pretty big loss for that one, but just the honorable mention, and just one of those things where you always want to remember that 9/8s don't always go up there. You never really know what can happen with some of those books, and Star Wars got really hot for a bit, and it's definitely cooled off as people have been, less into the Star Wars content lately. That was the honorable mention. That was number 11. All right, so now I'm going to start into that top 10. And so actually number 10 was actually a Golden Age book, and I feel like this one was this one was frustrating, because it was a stupid mistake on my part. So this was Boy Comics number 16. That is this book right here. And I paid $225 for a raw copy in 2021. And I sold it for $35.56, taking a loss of $194 or 86%. So I'll tell you what happened with this one. So this was during an Instagram live sale. And if you're not familiar, a lot of times with those, you're trying to price stuff out really, really quick, because somebody puts up a book. If you see it's a good deal, you try to claim it quick. And that's worked out well for me plenty of times. But every once in a while, that quick pricing causes you to make a mistake. And so with this one, the mistake was I didn't catch that the sale price that I saw was a pedigree. And it wasn't any pedigree. It was the Okajima pedigree. It's this one right here. And so you see this right here, you had a 7.0, a Boy Comics number 16, and it was a 2018 sale for $3,585. And so this is one of those things where I remember I saw it right after I wrote the claim, but I'm not someone who's going to back out of a claim. If I claim something, I pay for it. And I knew I made a mistake instantly when I did that claim. Because I saw that Okajima pedigree, and I was like, oh no. Because if you're not aware, talked about Okajima pedigrees before, they go for huge multiples of what that book is worth. I mean, look at right here. This was in a 7.5, sold for $315 in 2019. This is around the same time, sold for 10 times as much. And so that was a huge mistake on my part. Now, I auctioned off that Boy Comics 16. I decided I just wanted to move on from it. And I know that somebody that watches the channel actually won it, and they to me, they got a great deal on that book. I think regardless, that is a $100+ book. More obscure golden age books like this, auctions on eBay, aren't going to do all that great, but I just wanted to move on from it. And so I think they got a great deal on that one. But this is one of those things that if you are pricing, you've got to pay attention to these types of details. Pedigrees can add significant premiums to those books. And so do not assume that because a pedigree sold for that, that your non-pedigree book can sell for that. But that's not what I did. It's just that I didn't catch that it was the Okajima. I just, oh gosh, so frustrating with that one. But yeah, so that was number 10 and why I took a big loss in that one. But yeah, you know, it happens. All right, next one. Captain America number 100. So this was a graded copy that I had purchased. I bought this one in November of 2022 for $1,526. I sold it in May of 2024 for $1,550. So I actually sold it for about what I paid. But when you sell, you have seller's fees. So my loss on this one really is in the seller's fees. I took a loss of $207 or 13%. And I love this book. It's a great cover. I've had multiple copies of this book. It's just that this one I bought, I mean, I didn't buy it at the peak of the comic boom. I bought it late 2022, but just really had been flat since then. And that one ended up selling for about what I bought it for. And because of those seller's fees, you know, the eBay seller's fees, I think the fees in total were, $193. I also had a promotion of $31 on the book. So that led to my loss of $207.40 for Captain America number 100 in a 9.2. It's a beautiful book. It probably got pulled in here. Yeah, you can take a look at it. Yeah, so it was this one right here. So it was an old label, 9.2. You can see that it has, in here, it has 2,200, but it's crossed because I took an offer of 1,500 on this one. So Captain America, number 100, 9.2. Beautiful copy of it. And I just, high grade, Silver Age, always fun to have. But yeah, just like that, there's no guarantee that books will go up. And this had been, about 2 years. And I just decided to take that offer and move on from that book. All right, so that was number 9. Now for number 8, X-Men. X-Men appears on this list multiple times. A lot of these kind of like the mid to late comic boom period. And, they're books that are starting to make that turn now. They're getting a lot of these books are getting pretty good to buy now. But if you bought back in 2021, 2022, even into 2023, you're often taking a loss on this book if you're selling it now. But this was X-Men number 9. This is the first appearance of Lucifer, but that's not the main thing that people care about with this one. It's this meeting of the Avengers and the X-Men, this awesome battle cover. Great book. I really, really like this book. I like this cover. I think this is a great one. And you have to think it's going to happen at some point in the MCU, but the MCU doesn't really seem to be something that's driving values right now. But this one was a 5.5. I bought it in April of 2022 for $559 plus shipping. And I sold it in June of 2024 for $425, again, plus shipping. So I took a loss of $209.33 on that book, or 36%. So if we go down to the 5.5, we might see that one. So yeah, this one right here, I doubt this book sold for $695. We can check though. I mean, we'll see. But this was mine. I sold it for, you can see it's a $475 with a cross through it. I accepted $425. Yeah, great looking book. But let's check that out. So this one says $695. Let's look at X-Men number 9, because hey, maybe it did. Maybe somebody got a big sale on that book. But this is one of those things that you just always have to remember, that this is why it's good to check multiple sources. Yeah, so you can see here that sale was actually likely this one right here. Yeah, 494, June 25th. Yeah, June 25th. So when in eBay, if you send an offer through their messaging system, you can see it, this says fixed price, but that doesn't always get captured. And so GPA does capture that. I think it's probably a different way that GPA and Go Collect pull sales data in. So just something to be aware of, that even though it says 695 and it says fixed price, it isn't always that. And so you can check this in eBay using their Terapeak tool. With that, you can actually see the actual sales number, and then GPA often pulls in, or it does pull in the actual sales number. So that one actually sold for $494 versus the what appears to be $695 there. So just something to always be aware of with that. It's just things that, those little details that can be very important to know if you're, and why you shouldn't just use one pricing tool. I like using multiple pricing tools. I really like having the pictures and everything that go with this, because you never know if maybe a reason a book went low was that there was a big chunk out of the cover, and even though it's the same grade as another one, it doesn't present as well, or if there's a page quality difference or color strike difference, all those types of things that can impact the values of those books. All right, next one. So this would be number 7. This was Justice League number 1. This was a frustrating one. So if you follow me on Instagram, you know what I'm talking about on this one. Let's see if I can find it here. Where are you, Justice League number 1? So this is the Silver Age version. There's so many Justice League number 1s. All right, I'm just gonna go to GPA for this one then. So this is Justice League number 1 from, I believe it's 1960, something like that. Yeah, 1960. And I'll just pull up an image of it so you can see this book. Look at a 9.6 that sold recently for $348,000. I remember that one. That was a huge sale. So this is Justice League number 1. And the reason that this one was very frustrating was because I had a big problem with Buyer with this book, where they came back after me, claiming that because they didn't like how I packaged it. I had it in a Gemini mailer with 4 additional layers of cardboard, and it was, there was no damage to it, but then it felt like a scam. Like they reached out and they were complaining about my packaging, even though the book arrived perfectly safe and no damage or anything. And so I ended up they gave me some really bad review on eBay. I had to go through eBay. They removed it because he had threatened negative feedback on me, and wanted a refund, and which goes against eBay policy. And it's just all this stuff that felt real scammy. If you want to know more about it, you can go check out my Instagram page. You can see it's one of the posts that I made. But I did not respond well to this person reaching out, because what scams are. You can tell when people are trying to scam you. And then when you checked his feedback, that he had done this to a few other people as well. There was someone else on Instagram that reached out that he had done this to them too. And so you just got to watch out for that kind of stuff. But this one I bought in June of 2022 for $750, and I sold it for $600. And so I took a loss of $249, or 33%. So yeah, in addition to that, like taking a big loss on that book, and then having this person trying to get more, like try to scam me for more, it did not sit well with me. But yeah, that was number 7, Justice League number 1. Who knows? This could be a book that could be going up in the future with James Gunn and everything. Who knows what's going to go on with the DC books? But definitely took a nice loss on that one. All right, now the next one. This is more of the risk with books that you are buying for the PC. That you're willing to pay more for. And so when ultimately you go to sell that book, sometimes it can be harder to make that profit on them. And with these books, generally my goal isn't to make a profit. When I'm buying books for my keeper list, I mean, if I can buy it at a good price, great. But a lot of times my goal is to buy it at least at like break even, where I think I can break even on it. And this is Archie number 50. This is one of my favorite covers from the Golden Age. I love this cover. I think it's so great. But this book has been on my keeper list for years, and I've just been upgrading the book as I go. And so I think right now I have a 6.5. That's my current keeper copy. This was a 5.5. I paid $2,600 for this book, and I sold it for $2,500. But like I've said before, when you've got selling fees and all that, you end up taking a loss. So even though I only sold it for $100 less than I paid, there was an eBay fee of $313. So I took a loss of $421 on this book. This one might be on here too. Let's see. Yeah, it was this one right here. So 3,150, you know, with a cross through it, and I took 2,500. And there's that book. I mean, it is a great presenting copy of this book, off-white to white pages, really solid, solid book. But yeah, that was number 6. So keeper books, I can also, you know, I'll take losses on them eventually, because especially when I'm upgrading a book, because then I've got the new one. I just want to move on from that last one, and this one I ended up, you know, taking that $421 loss on. All right, so for number 5, back to X-Men. So this is X-Men number 121. This is the first, I think it's first full Alpha Flight. 120 is the cameo. 121 is the first full appearance of Alpha Flight. So this was a 9.8, and I picked up this book in September of 2022 for $1,144 plus shipping. I ended up selling it in February for $834. So I took a loss of $454 on this book, or 39%. That one I sold a little while ago. So that was, like I said, February. So we'll see if that one's on here somewhere. Actually, I have to go back. This is, I mean, it's a Bronze Age book. There's a lot of 9/8 out there. They sell all the time. Yep. So here it is. So this one, so it says $835, and I sold it for $835. So this one, I didn't do like a messaging offer or anything like that. But yeah, I've had a couple copies of this one over the last few years as well, in a 9.8. It is definitely, you know, these Bronze Age books, there's a lot of 9/8 out there. I mean, you can see here 465 9/8 of this one. And that's one of those things we've been talking about with the 9/8, the 9/9s. There are a fair amount of high grade copies of those books. So just something to always be aware of. I mean, this was a book that you can see here peaked around $3,000 in a 9.8. Prior to the comic boom was around a $500 book, and it's almost gotten all the way back there. I mean, look at this last sale at $530.69. So really, at that sale, at that price, it's pretty much all the way back to where it was. But definitely something that, who knows, could be a reasonable book to pick up now, given that pricing being all the way back around where it was, even maybe a little below where it was prior to the comic boom. All right, we're sticking with X-Men. So this was X-Men number 6. This was the let's see, the Submariner, first Submariner cover in X-Men, or first Submariner appearance in X-Men. I don't think he appeared in X-Men prior to this, but pretty early Silver Age Submariner appearance, 1964. His first Silver Age appearance was in Fantastic Four number 4. This would have been about a year or maybe year and a half later. At a 7.5 that I bought in October of 2022 for $999. I sold it for $450. So a loss of $579, or 58%. So pretty big loss for that one. This is something where definitely Submariner got super hot with the second Black Panther movie, and then just kind of died off after that. And so definitely character that people have been down on since that movie. If we take a look at the 7.5, you can see here, prior to that comic boom period, it was around a $450 book. I sold it for $450, so right back down around where it was prior to the comic boom. But yeah, went as high as $1,352. Had multiple sales over 1,000. So I mean, that's why I ended up picking it up back then. But definitely corrected after that movie, back down to around where it was prior to the comic boom. So that was number 4. Now for number 3, we've got Mr. Miracle number 4. This is the first appearance of Big Barda, kind of a fan favorite DC character. I had picked up this book. A big part of it was because of the Justice League movie, and the rumors that this character was going to play a pretty big role potentially in that movie, which did not happen. This was a 9.6. So I bought this 9.6 like right at the beginning, like early stages of the comic boom. So I paid $1,350 in December of 2020, sold it for $700 in May of this year, a loss of $760 or 55%. So let's see, I think this one should be in here. Yep, right here. So you can see here it says, you know, 750 with a best offer accepted. So it was a $700 sale. Here's that book. And yeah, great looking book, 9.6, early Bronze Age, 1971. Not a ton of high grade copies of this one. I mean, you can see here only 10 9/8s, 33 9/6s, 811 total universals. So, I mean, this is a pretty rare book in grade. I feel like this is a book that should go for more, but hey, you know, it is what it is. Sold for $700, took a loss of $760. So still haven't crossed that $1,000 mark. The top loss does though, but we're not there yet. We got number 2, which was just under $1,000 loss. So next one, we've got Avengers number 48. This is the number two loss. So Avengers number 48, that first appearance of Dane Whitman as the Black Knight. Oh man, this book went crazy during the comic boom and got wrecked. So I paid $1,350 for an 8.5 in March of 2022. I sold this book in February of this year for $485, a loss of $942 or 70%. Let's take a look at that 8.5. Let's kind of see where the prices are in that one. So you can see here, I mean, prior to the Black Knight being known as part of the MCU, 8.5 was like $150 book. Then you had these spikes, you know, when people are starting to speculate on that. Went up to around 550, 600, peaked around 2,000. This sale, 2,086, peaked around $2,000 for that 8.5, and has just been trending down since, with most recent sales around $480 to $520. Around a $500 book right now. Here's my sale, $485. And my loss of $942. And it was a white page copy too. Now, one thing that's interesting with this book is I've seen quite a few copies of this are white pages. I don't know why that is, but I've noticed this book specifically has quite a few white page copies out there. Whereas books like Avengers 57, a little bit later, that first Vision, I don't see white pages nearly that often. But this one, a lot of them are white pages. I don't know why that is. But yeah, big loss for that. Not quite $1,000, but $942. Not a fun one. Yeah, that is one of those things where speculation just spiked that book. Also, the fact that the book got so expensive. This is one of those cases where book got so expensive that people started getting them graded. I guarantee you, there weren't nearly as many copies of this book on the census prior to the comic boom. I bet there were under 1,000. I mean, let's go take a look. So if we look at CGC data, this is that site that I've talked about quite a bit, what I use for my 9899 videos. If we go Avengers number 48, and what year was that? 1968. So we go 1968. So let's look at, we'll jump back to 2018. So if we look at the pricing on this book, in 2018, let's see what this one was. So if we do January 2018, that's before the announcement, and this was like a $150 book. We can see how many copies were added to the census in that time period. So this might take a little bit. Oh, it didn't. It was actually really quick. Okay, so in that time period, 2,586 universals were added. Let's see how many are on there right now. How many universals? 2,892. So there were only about 300 copies on census universal when that announcement came out that Dane Whitman was going to be the Black Knight in the MCU. So 2,500 plus copies have been added in that time period. 598s, 2396s, 4594s, 6992s, 12590s, like lots of high grade copies too. And it's because this book didn't have nearly that much value back then. And so all of a sudden it gets super valuable. People send them all in, and then that crushes the price because then they're just selling them all. That's the same thing we saw happen with Raphael #1, which is another book that has appeared on my list here, I think twice, because I've gotten wrecked by Raphael #1 because it was a book that didn't have a lot of value until the comic boom. It spiked in price. People sent them all in, and it just destroyed the value of that book. So it's not, well, and I don't want to necessarily say that. I don't want to say it destroyed the value of it, because you can see it's back down. It's still back down around where it was in like 2019, 2020. It's still well above where it was in 2018. It's that it can't hold these types of really high values that it jumped to when you've got a big influx of copies on the that are out there and available for purchase. So yep, that's one of the useful parts of the CGC data site, is it lets you see what some of those changes are, because something like Amazing Fantasy 15, it's not going to have nearly that many copies added in this time period because it's already super valuable. There's only a few getting graded, maybe even a week, maybe even less than one per week. You never know. But a book like this that gets super expensive super quick, you just add tons of copies. It was just like that first White Vision. I did a video on that one too. All right. Now for the biggest loss that I took, the first half of 2024. Again, it was X-Men. X-Men #141. This is the first part of the Days of Future Past story. I bought this in March of 2021, like right when the comic boom was really starting to get hot. And I paid $1,908 for a newsstand 9.8. I didn't pay the most that was paid for that book, but it was pretty close. I think the peak at that point was around 2,500. And the newsstands super hot at that time period. They're still more expensive than the directs, but they have definitely cooled down. I sold this book for $1,000 in March of this year. So I took a loss of $1,074 or 56%. So yeah, that one definitely stung. So, I mean, there's a lot of these out there, not nearly as many 9/8 of the newsstand. That's something that, yes, this is very early in that period of transition from newsstand to direct. And so there are more newsstands out there. But in terms of a 9/8, there are definitely less newsstands out there, at least based on what you can see from sales data. The 9/8 newsstands sell much less often than the directs, and that's why they do still go for a premium. The 9/8 newsstands in this era do go for a premium, and that's because of grade rarity, not rarity of the book, but grade rarity. And but yeah, that was my biggest loss of the first half of this year. Comic boom is just one of those, there was that time period when everybody thought everything was going to keep going up, and it didn't. So I still have some books that I've picked up during that time period that I definitely took losses on. A lot of the books that are in this 31 losses that I took in the first half of this year were picked up in 2021, 2020, and 2022. Just still in that comic boom period. And so, yeah, sometimes you just got to realize those losses and then move on from them. So with that, what can we learn from these losses? As I said, that's one of the most important things, why it's good to look back at these, look at those losses. What can you learn from them? And the trends that I saw were very similar to the last video that I did. And it was that a lot of the losses I took were on major Silver and Bronze Age titles that I bought during the comic boom. Some of those feel like they've started to reach that turning point now where they're maybe getting near a bottom. Some of them aren't, but these were X-Men, Avengers, Amazing Spider-Man, which I didn't have in this top 10, but some of the other losses I took: Amazing Spider-Man, Ghost Rider, Star Wars, those books, a lot of those major titles, Silver, Bronze Age time periods, is where I took, some of those losses. Now, I did also take some losses on some of the more obscure Golden Age titles, and like that Boy Comics #16. And that was just, sometimes it's pricing mistakes. That was a case where it was a pricing error on my part, trying to price out real quickly during an Instagram live sale. and you can make mistakes in that. So that's what happened with that one, and just paid way too much, off the bat for that book. So, from those, I mean, the important takeaways, again, similar to the last video, no matter how big the key is, how popular the book is, if you pay too much, you pay too much. And there are some of those cases where I paid too much, like the Archie 50. When I bought that, I just paid too much at that point in time. I mean, I didn't pay way too much. I mean, I sold it for 2,500, bought it for 26. But when you're taking into account fees, selling fees, took a loss. And so that's one of those things, like the selling fees, you always have to make sure you always consider that when you're buying, when you're buying books, which I do, but you always have to consider that. And those silver, bronze age books, like, just because they're popular characters, popular books, you've got that trend from the comic boom where books have been trending down. And so you just have to keep an eye on that. Now, I've talked about that a lot lately in the last, few months. And there are books in that era that are looking very appealing now, but there are other ones that still are really high above where they were prior to the comic boom. And depending on where that book sits, I'll be willing to pick up that book or not. And so just something to always think about when you're making that, that purchasing decision. If the price matters to you, if you just want the book and you don't care, that's fine. Do whatever you want. But if that price really matters to you, if you are worried about taking a loss in the future on that book, something to always consider. The other thing, and I've talked about this a number of times, and this is why I've taken this step on some books. And it's, if the book is trending down, consider just dropping the price and getting out of it instead of trying to chase that price. I talked about that earlier in the video, where if you keep trying to chase that price, you may end up way lower than you would have been. But if you just undercut everybody right away and just move on from it, then yeah, you take that loss now, but you've got the book sold and you get to, go on and buy something else. But hopefully you enjoyed this video, enjoyed my suffering a little bit, and learned something from this. But if you did, please hit that like button, subscribe button, notification bell, and I will see you on the next one.